On your composite inverse worksheet, I want you to change number 3 to tangents instead of cotangents, and then let's proceed. So when I'm looking at the tangent of 2 pi over 3, when I start on the inside of this composite function, evaluating the tangent of 2 pi over 3 doesn't have any domain restrictions. I could go over to 2 pi over 3. I know because of the unit circle and my memorization of the unit circle that at 2 pi over 3, cosine is negative 1/2, and sine is root 3 over 2. And if I wanted to find the tangent of that angle, I would just do sine over cosine. But that's not what I'm being asked to do here. I am asked to undo tangent of 2 pi over 3 using the inverse tangent. Now, a lot of you are probably thinking, well, inverse tangent and tangent, those are inverse operations, so they just undo each other, and the answer is 2 pi over 3. Well, that goes back to the notes that we took about inverse tangent functions and inverse trig functions. This is not going to work because 2 pi over 3 is in the second quadrant, and our restricted domain for tangent is from negative pi over 2 to a positive pi over 2. If we look at the graph, here's the tangent function. There are asymptotes at negative pi over 2 and positive pi over 2. Now, the range does go off to positive infinity and negative infinity, but it never repeats. This function that you see in white, stretching from negative pi over 2 to positive pi over 2, but not including those values, does pass the horizontal and the vertical line test. So by restricting the tangent domain to negative pi over 2 and positive pi over 2, which would be the third and the fourth quadrant, we can use the inverse tangent function. But that means I can't answer this question with a value from the second quadrant or a value from the third quadrant. So those quadrants are out. I have restricted my domain to only quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. So let's think about this. Okay, let's go back to the idea. Well, what is tangent at 2 pi over 3? The exact value isn't important. What is important here is that I realize it's going to be negative. Sine divided by cosine, so root 3 over 2 divided by negative 1/2 is going to give me a negative tangent value. Well, the only other quadrant where I get a negative tangent value is down here in the fourth quadrant. So I have to think about my reference angles. 2 pi over 3 has a reference angle of pi over 3 right here in the second quadrant. Well, if you notice the vertical angles I just created with this blue line, this reference angle is also pi over 3. But if I think about this in context of my domain for tangent from negative pi over 2 to positive pi over 2, my reference angle for my final answer actually needs to be negative. This final answer, tangent, negative 1, inverse tangent or arctangent of tangent of 2 pi over 3 is going to be negative pi over 3. It's still the same tangent value, but in the fourth quadrant and in our domain from negative pi over 2 to a positive pi over 2.